What's up, guys? Welcome into another edition of Bogey Free. We are taking a little bit of a break from our typical DFS, although I guess you could consider best ball a form of DFS. But we are here today to talk with special guest James Koh. You can find him on Twitter at James D. Koh. What's going on, man? How are you today?
Nothing much, just chilling. I kind of in between jobs right now, which is great. And I'm just kind of enjoying my free time, honestly.
Sweet, yeah, that's great. I'm a teacher, so I'm having a little bit of you're getting a taste of the teacher life right now with the free summer. So
That's exactly right.
that works, right? So yeah, why don't we dive right in? Obviously, people are pretty familiar with best balls, whether it be draft or whether it be MFL 10s or any other format. But real quick before we get too deep into the weeds here, how do you view just like general best ball strategy? Like, is there a particular way that you go into drafts with a strategy in mind? How do you typically attack a best ball draft?
So again, just from a beginner standpoint, if you're playing in the best ball league, there's no roster management, right? So what the team that you draft, that's the team you got. So for me, I think the biggest shift in strategy is I tend to stay away from running backs early on, mostly because I don't want to invest heavy draft capital into a position group that is highly volatile. Whether it's from an injury standpoint, statistical standpoint, whatever it might be. Geez, look at Todd Gurley. He's poster boy number one for how volatile that position group is. Phenomenal player rookie year, horrible season two, the best running back in football in season three. So it's a highly volatile position. And I get that fantasy in general is a highly volatile game. That being said, I think you can more accurately project and see, steadier statistical outcomes from the wide receiver position, which is why I tend to go wide receiver heavy early on and really backload my draft with a lot of sleeper running backs that, again, because it's best ball, they might just happen to pop at the right time, and they'll just be inserted into your lineup. So I think that's the biggest strategic change that I go in with, is because there's no roster management, quarterbacks have higher value. Wide receivers to me have higher value as well, just because it's a steadier flow of stats.
Right. So I guess we got some questions last night on Twitter as well, and I guess this is a good time to ask this. So in a typical redraft league, do you find yourself going zero RB as well, or is that more of a best ball thing for you?
I don't really have a strategy when it comes to redraft. And because people always ask me, would you rather go wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, or would you rather go a couple running backs and then wide? First of all, it's highly dependent on where you are in your draft. Are you drafting with the top 4 pick? Or are you drafting with the bottom 4 pick? And then the other thing is, you got to know your league mates too. Is this going to be a draft where you see Nuke Hopkins drop to you to let's say 8 or 9 or 10?
Right.
I might be thinking, hey, I want to go running back early. But if Nuke falls to me at 10, trust me, I'm scooping that dude up, right? So you have to be really flexible throughout your draft, not just during the first 4 or 5 rounds, but literally the entire draft process, where you have a bunch of sleepers in mind that you want to get to at the wide receiver position, at the running back position. And again, you just got to be super, super flexible. So I really just come in just with no strategy whatsoever. I just, pick up the guys that I like at good draft prices.
Yeah, I agree. I was in a draft last night on draft, and I think the first 8 picks were running backs, and then AB went 9th, and then I got Nuke 10th.
AB went 9th. Oh,
I was quite happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's crazy that AB would go 9th.
Yeah, so it's definitely a thing where we're noticing sort of a pivot back to, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, where RBs were going pretty early consistently, and I think that opens up more if you do want to take advantage and go zero RB, I think you're getting, you could theoretically get, a Julio at the top of the second round, it's pretty bonkers to me. So why don't we take a look? So we have an idea now with running backs and wide receivers where we're going. But talk a little bit about your strategy when going for quarterbacks, because obviously in most redraft leagues and most experts will tell you wait on quarterback for as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
So how do you view that in best ball drafts?
So in best ball, again, I put a much higher emphasis on quarterbacks where, again, your typical redraft, because you can, manage your roster, you're going to, take these guys super, super late. Mostly because, again, if you're not drafting them, hell, you could stream the position. Well, streaming doesn't exist in best ball. So if you're honestly trying to go out there and draft, I don't know, let's just say, Joe Flacco or Eli Manning as your quarterback one, you're in trouble. You're in trouble because you can't stream the position. You can't play the matchup. So to me, drafting a quarterback much earlier than you normally would, really pays dividends because, again, and here's my thing. Don't just draft one good quarterback. You want to draft two pretty good quarterbacks. And I'm not saying, you're going to be drafting Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson or whoever might be in the first round. That's not the case. You're still waiting till round 3, 4 to go draft a guy like Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson. I took Deshaun Watson in the 5th round in an industry, best ball league that I'm playing in right now. In a redraft league, I probably wouldn't do that. Although, full disclosure, I love me some Deshaun. But yeah, 5th round, I felt comfortable because, again, best ball format, if this guy pops in any given week, it's going to be great. I'm probably we haven't completed the draft yet. It's a slow draft, but I'm probably going to follow that up with another 2 quarterbacks, to be honest with you. I'm probably going to roster 3 quarterbacks on my roster because, again, I want to insulate myself from injury. I want to be able to insulate myself from wild variants as well. Look, we can talk all day long about running backs and wide receivers and why they should be valued more than – but at the end of the day, if you look at the top scorers in the position, just pure point-wise, it's going to be quarterbacks. Obviously, in best ball, you want to capture as many quarterback points as possible, and that's why I put a premium on the quarterback position because you can't manage it. If you've got 1 or 2 guys that go down, all of a sudden it's hard to win with subpar quarterback play.
Absolutely, and just sort of piggybacking off of that. Anthony Amico, he's been on the show before. Most of you have probably heard us talk about him or seen him on the show. He had an interesting tweet the other day. So since 2013, 40% of 30-point games from the quarterback position came from the top 6 quarterbacks drafted. So there you go. You want one of those guys, right? And as far as like roster construction goes, I was looking at draft results from last year, and as far as win rates for roster construction, so 2 quarterbacks, 51.9% of league winners had 2 quarterbacks on their rosters, and 46% had 3 quarterbacks.
Wow.
So you basically, obviously you don't want one because then you're missing out on a week. Hopefully everybody realizes that with the bye week. But even stockpiling more of those guys, which if you're going late quarterback, you probably want to try and get, but it's so much from your other positions that obviously it hamstrings you pretty hard. But shout out to the 0.3% of people that won their league with 1 quarterback last year.
That's incredible.
Pretty amazing.
That's amazing.
And then so another position that we typically preach to sort of wait on, depending on who you're looking at, would be tight end. So obviously you have a few guys up at the top who are going reasonably early, although I think this year we're getting a little bit of a discount depending on where you look when it comes to guys like Gronk and Kelsey. But what's your general tight end the way that you attack the tight end position?
As you mentioned, I wait on tight end because you talk about volatility. There's just too much volatility, I think, at the tight end position. And quite honestly, I don't think they impact the scoring enough to even make a difference. So, yeah, I'll draft two. I'll draft two tight ends, but I just don't care enough about the position. Because A, it's extremely volatile, and B, they just don't score points. So especially after you get outside of, as you mentioned, the elite tier of tight end. So, and you know, even for me, someone like Zach Ertz, I know that he was a tight end one last year. I'm not going to pay that premium. I'm not going to chase those points for a guy that has been in the league for a long time and finally produced for an entire year. Now, look, he comes in spurts and has looked great, but I don't know. To me, I'm not interested in paying a premium price for Zach Ertz. So I may pay a premium if the chips fall right for somebody like Gronk, Kelsey, or even Jimmy Graham. But man, I tell you, I have a hard time paying a steep price. I'm talking anything within the first 8 rounds for a tight end, regardless of who it might be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just looking through again, like win rates from last year, as far as it goes with roster construction, it's pretty much the same thing as we see with quarterbacks. You want 2 or you want 3, and that's about it. You really, once you start drafting, if you get into 4 tight ends, only 2.2% win rate, and then 5. I mean, if you're drafting 5 tight ends, then you probably shouldn't be drafting at all, to be honest.
Right.
So there were 9 tight ends last year that had over a 10% win rate on draft, and 3 of them were drafted outside of the top 17 at the position. So obviously, if you hit on one of those guys, you're just printing money, because it's just one of those things where, like you said, the position is so volatile. And if you can, I like to try and pair tight ends a little bit, where maybe I have a guy that I know has like a decent floor as far as targets go, like a Delaney Walker type or a Kyle Rudolph type guy. And then you take, 1 or 2 stabs later in the draft at a guy who you think has some spike weeks in him, and you're pretty well set at the tight end position. So
I think if you're playing best ball, if there's one guy that I absolutely am always target, it's George Kittle. Again, he might be a guy, again, if you're pairing him with somebody, as you mentioned, that is a consistent week in and week out producer, I think Delaney Walker is a great call because he's coming in at a pretty good discount as well. I think that offense are going to open up a little bit more with Matt LaFleur there now as the offensive coordinator in Tennessee. I love Delaney Walker. I know he's a little bit longer in the tooth, but he and Marcus Mariota have certainly developed a pretty good chemistry. But, man, George Kittle late. I don't know. There's something about the San Francisco 49ers offense, the athletic profile of George Kittle as well. He's a tremendous athlete, man. And he's a tight end that I find myself drafting or wanting to draft super late in drafts as well, because he's practically free.
Yeah, absolutely. He's definitely one of the guys who, when he gets to the top of the list, I'm just hoping he isn't getting sniped for me somewhere. Right. So I'm definitely fully in on that. All right, so we hit some positions. Why don't we go through a little bit of I guess like section off the draft a little bit. Okay. Everybody knows the guys in the beginning of drafts that everyone's in love with. Do you have any guys that you've in like the first 2 or 3 rounds that you've really been trying to avoid because of their price?
Well, I mean, there are certain guys that are just non-starters for me, and I think Joe Mixon is certainly one of those guys. Right now he's got an ADP, somewhere in the top 30. Certainly, you won't see him get too far outside the top 30 in most redraft leagues, but I just don't understand the price. I really don't. He's going to be mixing in with Gio Bernard. Look, man, bottom line is he was abysmal to start the year, and I get that he was better to close out the year, but I still don't think he was a very good player. And all the metrics that I've looked at and the game tape that I've watched, I think Gio Bernard's just a better player. And now I get it. They spent good draft capital in getting Joe Mixon. I understand that they're going to try to get him on the field, but I don't think he looked that great last year. And what has really changed in Cincinnati? From an offensive standpoint, they look pretty much the same. Marvin Lewis is still doing the Marvin Lewis thing. So I don't really see a whole hell of a lot changing. And again, I'll go back to some, I wrote about next gen stats a lot last year. And I think, there wasn't anybody actually, I think, that wrote more about next gen than I did. But you look at next gen stats, man, and I got this, it's called yards gained after close. It basically measures with microchips embedded into the shoulder pads, okay? It measures distance, all right? And there's a stat called yards gained after close. And Joe Mixon, in that regard, was extremely, extremely ordinary. He had a 3.46 yards gained after close. So when a defender got to within 1 yard, he would pick up 3.46 yards after that. That's super average. Jeremy Hill actually had a better yards gained after close number than Joe Mixon. He was in line with guys like Terrence West, DeMarco Murray, guys of that nature. James Conner was somewhere in that range as well. So I don't know, man. He seemed like an extremely, extremely pedestrian runner to me. And there was some pop plays that he had, some athletic plays that he had, but overall, I just wasn't impressed by what I saw. And at that price, it's just a non-starter for me.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, with Gio there, obviously his ceiling is relatively capped anyway as far as receiving production is going to go. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I'm looking now, and he hasn't gone past the 33rd pick in the past 2 weeks on draft right now, which is a hefty price for a guy who doesn't really have that ceiling that we're looking for.
Yeah, I agree. And so again, he's at his price, it's a complete non-starter for me. I think another player that I'm tending to avoid as well is LaShawn McCoy, whose advanced metrics look pretty bad. And quite honestly, it looked like we saw some degradation of skill and explosiveness last year from LaShawn. And again, this is, forget about all the legal troubles that he could be facing as well. That's a separate issue, which also adds a lot of risk and volatility to LaShawn McCoy. But Buffalo's offense is going to be, I don't know, from everything that it looks like, that Buffalo Bills offense looks like it's going to be absolute trash. Yeah. I mean, it's a mess at quarterback. I'm not a big Josh Allen guy. AJ McCarron is there, who I think is a capable backup, but if he's your starter, that's a problem. And again, I'll go back to yards gained after close, and LaShawn McCoy was not good. 3.29 yards gained after close. Again, when a defender got to within 1 yard of him, which is within tackling range, LaShawn McCoy averaged 3.29 yards. I'll just give you a sense of how bad that is. That was worse than Mike Gillislee. That was worse than Adrian Peterson. That was worse than Samaje Perine. That was worse than Thomas Rawls, worse than Lance Dunbar. LaShawn McCoy's advanced numbers last year were not good. And you might be saying to yourself, well, wait, hold on now. He averaged just about 4 yards per carry. How does that work out? Well, it's because his offensive line gave him unbelievable push up front, unreal push up front. That's what LaShawn McCoy got. He got a real good running start before defenders got close. But the Bills' offensive line, think about it now. They lost their top left tackle this offseason. I don't think they really address it in the draft as well. So I think we're going to see that come back to earth in terms of offensive line play. LaShawn McCoy, to me, again, a top 40 pick, top 30 pick, I'm tending to avoid.
Yeah, I think just even with the, like you mentioned, even with the legal issues, he should be falling further than he is regardless. He's been drafted over the past 2 weeks somewhere between 16 and 58th overall. So a pretty wide range depending on which draft you're in, but it's definitely not something that I'm willing to pay up for there. I did want to get your thoughts about Alvin Kamara too. Obviously an explosive player. He's going at RB5, and he's been drafted as high as second overall over the past few weeks. But obviously he's I guess a nice way to put it would be a candidate for regression, right? So, what are you doing with him? Are you including him if he falls to a certain point? Are you avoiding him altogether? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, I mean, look, I love Alvin Kamara. It's hard not to from the film that we saw last year. And again, we talk about advanced numbers. He was off the charts. I won't bore you with all that, but he was unbelievable as a football player from any way you want to slice it. Whether you saw him on the field or whether you're looking at the advanced numbers or whatever it might be, this guy was unreal. Now. And keep in mind, last year, too, he did all of this where in the first month of the season, the Saints didn't know what to do with him. They were trying to figure out some rotation between Mark Ingram, Adrian Peterson, and Alvin Kamara didn't really get a whole hell of a lot of work. They shipped off Adrian Peterson, and Kamara exploded. Now there's no Mark Ingram to start the season, so I think that's why there's so much healthy optimism to what we're going to see with Kamara coming into 2018. Look, is there going to be some efficiency downturn with Kamara? Yeah, of course. There has to be. He saw otherworldly efficiency numbers last year. I 100% agree with that. That being said, I think most of that will be covered by an increased volume as well. So whatever concerns you might have in terms of regression from an efficiency standpoint, I'm more than comfortable saying he will make up for that with volume as well. So I'm really excited about Kamara. If he's not, I absolutely have him as a top 10 player. And if you don't have him as a top 12 guy, boy, I really think you're missing the boat.
Yeah. And obviously I think it sort of is reminding me of the conversations that were had about Tyreek Hill heading into last year, right? These crazy efficiency numbers, are they going to hold up? And if they don't hold up, what is going to be the volume jump that's going to make up for that? And obviously, like you mentioned, with the Ingram suspension, that certainly helps. But it's pretty amazing. He scored once every 15 and a half touches. Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anybody else that's jumping out to you as a guy you're avoiding in those first few rounds?
I'm torn on Darius Geis, man. And again, we're talking about a dude that's most likely going to be a top 40 selection in most drafts. He's probably going to be a top 30 selection, quite honestly, in a lot of drafts because people are so hot and heavy on running backs this year. Look, Darius Geis as a talent, I love him. I mean, he's a tremendous athlete, hard runner, powerful runner. Looked very explosive during his time at LSU. I mean, keep in mind, this is a team that had Leonard Fournette. He got drafted. They didn't miss a beat. Darius Geis just came in and did what Leonard Fournette did and more. Okay, now that being said, they ran a lot of power there at LSU. As a matter of fact, I think that's pretty much the only thing they ran there. It was such an uncreative offense. But Jay Gruden with Washington now, he's going to run a lot of zone concepts, right? Read options and outside zone, inside zone. I'm not saying Darius Geis can't do it. I'm just saying he hasn't done it in his career, really. So I'm unless the offense changes for Geis, which it could, or maybe if Geis picks up the offense this offseason, which he could do that as well. I just am curious to see how that's going to look. And again, I don't think Jay Gruden's really had success at the running back position. I mean, Chris Thompson was great and all, but he was, again, more of that kind of hybrid type, running back. Darius Geis is not that dude. You got to get him the ball. And from what I've seen, I mean, you want to get him the ball with a head of steam. Is he going to do well from a shotgun read? I don't know. I think that's going to be a big question mark. Now, how much question I have concerning Geis fitting into that offense is not reflected at all in ADP. So again, a top 30 selection, a top 35 selection for Darius Geis, that's an awfully high price to pay, knowing that I could get Jay Ajayi in the same price range, who's probably going to have a similar role as Darius Geis. So I'd much rather pay the price for Jay Ajayi than Darius Geis, and because they have such similar valuations, and as a matter of fact, Darius Geis almost assuredly going higher than Jay Ajayi, I'd rather pay that price, man. So Darius Geis is, again, fabulous player, not sure about scheme fit. Given the price tag, probably not going to pay it.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, with Jay Gruden offenses, so you figure the last 4 years, excuse me, as a head coach, and a few years prior to that as the offensive coordinator, his RB1 has never finished in the top 12.
That's amazing.
For whatever that's worth. Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit outside of the 3-round range, but the last guy I wanted to talk to you about in these first few rounds is Rashad Penny. There's a lot of talk going around the Twitter sphere about Penny versus Carson and what's Pete Carroll going to do, and whether it's it's one of those things where I think Josh Hermsmeyer was tweeting about it the other day. We want to assume that these coaches are going to make the correct decisions. But we also have to live in reality where they don't always do the most optimal things. So what's your read on the Seattle running back situation? Are you drafting either of those guys, or what's the story there?
I find it interesting that people are dumping on Chris Carson for whatever reason. I thought he was a fabulous player last year before he got hurt. Now, granted, he only had 49 carries for us to really see anything, but quite honestly, what he was giving you on the football field was pretty special, to be honest with you. Look, I'll go back to the advanced numbers one last time here for Chris Carson, but again, over 49 carries, and I get it, super small sample size, yards gained after close, and again, this is a terrific measure of elusiveness. Keep in mind how bad that offensive line was last year in 2017. I think they've addressed it a little in 2018. And so I think you'll see improved offensive line play there. But Chris Carson, 3.74 yards gained after close. Okay, that's better than Le'Veon Bell. That's better than Carlos Hyde. And it was better than Dalvin Cook when he was on the field as well. 3.74 is pretty good. It's not an awesome number by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, 3.75 to me tells me that this guy's a pretty good football player. And to be honest with you, watching him play, I think the film backs it up. Super powerful guy, extremely athletic, great athletic traits. So I'm confused as to why fantasy Twitter seems to not like Chris Carson. If he wins the starting gig, I'd be surprised 0%. Now, that being said, look, man, you will not find a bigger fan of Rashad Penny than myself. I love that kid. He had 5 consecutive 200-plus yard rushing games at San Diego State to close out his campaign as an Aztec. So this guy's unbelievable. He's a freak, man. But Chris Carson was a good player last year. So if they're in a 50-50 split, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And to be honest with you, from a real-life football perspective, that's kind of what you want. 2 guys that are pretty similar in skill set and athleticism, being able to spell each other, you don't miss a beat on offense. That's really what you want. So I think Penny, to me, certainly is an interesting prospect. I love him. And I think he's going to fit very well with what Seattle wants to get done. But Chris Carson's going to be there. And so long as he stays healthy, he's going to be there for the long haul as well. So that's what I would expect. I would expect them to mix and match Chris Carson and Rashad Penny throughout the entire 2018 campaign.
Gotcha. All right. So, all right, we've been a little negative through this first little part with these potential busts. So why don't we flip the script a little bit and talk about some guys we do like? I guess sort of like the mid rounds where you're still investing like some significant draft capital in these guys, but it's not drafting DJ first last year and he gets hurt in the first game and right. You're kind of screwed. As I was many, many times over when I strayed from 0 RB. So who are we looking at here? I have a couple guys in mind, but maybe a couple of running backs. If let's say you went, wide receiver the first 3 or 4 rounds. Who are some running backs you're targeting in the middle here?
Marshawn Lynch is falling in drafts, and especially in PPR drafts, people don't feel like Marshawn Lynch is going to do very much. And I understand the concerns. The age is there, certainly. And quite frankly, what we saw in the first half of 2017 was concerning. You're thinking, oh, man, Marshawn's cooked. He's done. But I just think it was a matter of him getting into game shape and him finding his sea legs again, because he was truly one of the best running backs in all of football, both in real life and in fantasy, regardless of format. Marshawn Lynch, the last half of 2017, PPR, non-PPR, he was a top 13 running back. So we're talking about a guy now that you're getting, in the 7th round or later of your fantasy draft. He's being drafted well outside of the top 15, 20 running backs. And I really think Marshawn Lynch, again, with an offensive line that still has a lot of talent. We saw a little degradation there last year. That might have had more to do with morale than it did talent, but still a talented bunch there up front for Oakland. And then John Gruden coming in, and he said openly, he's going to switch more to a power run scheme, which I think fits that personnel a little bit better. They ran a lot of zone last year. But yeah, I think with power concepts, working with Marshawn Lynch and a head coach that is dedicated to running the ball, Marshawn Lynch is a no-brainer for me, especially at that price. I don't care what the downside risk is. At that price, Marshawn Lynch, I absolutely love the value there. And I really think he's going to be a top 15 running back in 2018.
I like it. I have my Marshawn Seahawks jersey hanging in my closet proudly right now, so I'm happy about it. And he's another guy where, I mean, depending on how many drafts you do, you can sort of get a feel for where these guys are going. And the range that he's being drafted is pretty crazy. I just pulled up, Fantasy Insiders, Josh Fantasy ADHD has his app up. And he's going anywhere from 54th to 113th. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So if you can get him, all the way towards the end of that, that's insane value to me as well. What are your thoughts on Lamar Miller? I'm seeing that I've been sort of seeing just about everywhere that he's quote unquote underrated, which probably means that he's rated appropriately.
Yeah.
It's one of those Twitter echo chamber type deals where everybody says that same exact thing, that he's underrated. But I do think there's a case to be made for him. A couple weeks ago, it came out that D'Onta Foreman is not going to be 100%. At least as of right now, he's not 100%. He'll probably be playing, but not necessarily, back to full speed. So what are your thoughts on him? Because I've been trying to snatch him up in a lot of places so far in my drafts.
Yeah. Look, when Deshaun Watson was on the field, Lamar Miller was a top 10 fantasy running back. So, I understand where there's going to be a lot of, enthusiasm regarding Lamar Miller, and especially given his draft price, because he's going pretty late. You know what I mean? But that being said, I think the efficiency measures were pretty abysmal. And quite honestly, if you looked at Lamar the last couple of years, I don't know if it's a square peg round hole situation, or I just don't know if he's just lost something. But he wasn't the explosive player that we saw in doses in Miami, as he has worn a Houston Texans uniform. So I don't know, man. To me, he's a pretty average running back, easily replaceable with pretty much, I don't know, any running back right now. So I understand why. The funny thing is, man, I don't think he's underrated. I just think he's rated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if you look from, I don't know. I started drafts when drafts started doing them after the Super Bowl. I've been, just trying to grind out as many drafts as I possibly can. And his price has definitely, he's creeping into the top 50 ADP now. And he's RB26 over the last couple of weeks, which a couple of weeks ago, he was early, low 30s probably. So he's definitely moving up. and I haven't been taking him as much,
No.
over the past, like, say, week or two.
Yeah.
But I think the volume is obviously going to be there for him. If he can do anything with it, I guess that's another story. But at that price, I think I'm a little hesitant with a lot of the other running backs around him right now. So
Yeah.
I just find myself, if I'm going running back at that point, sort of landing on him.
I don't know, man. To be honest with you, given his price range right now, he's going somewhere in the early 50s, right?
Yeah.
In terms of overall value, right? So whatever that means, whether that's going to be a fifth or sixth round valuation, depending on your league size. But there's other players in that range that I'm more interested in, quite honestly. I mean, Dion Lewis is in that range. Ronald Jones is in that range. Royce Freeman, who I love in Denver, is in that range. I'm not a big Sony Michel guy, but if you are, he's in that range too. So I don't know, man. Lamar Miller, I'm not 100% sure why people keep saying I do understand why they're saying he's underrated, because when he played with Deshaun Watson, he's a top 10 running back. So thereby, if Deshaun Watson is healthy, you're potentially getting a top 10 running back as an RB25 or whatever the valuation is right now. So I do understand where the mentality is, but there's certainly downside risk too, that your typical top 10 running back, fantasy running back, doesn't necessarily carry with him either. So I think he's a good player. I think for where he's going in drafts, it's just he is so butter on white bread type dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, it's fine. I don't hate it, but I'll just draft him if I have to. But I'm not going to get excited about drafting Lamar Miller.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fair. All right. So as we're still going through, I guess sort of that like 4 through 8 round, what wide receivers are you finding yourself being drawn to in this range?
Wide receiver wise, man, it's kind of interesting because I have found myself to go a little more wide receiver heavy on the earlier part of my drafts. But if there's one guy that I do particularly like, it's Corey Davis. He's going, somewhere in the 60s, just depending on what your league is looking like. But Corey Davis with Matt LaFleur there, and Matt LaFleur is their offensive coordinator, who comes from that LA Rams coaching tree last year. It's interesting to me anyways. I don't necessarily know what it's exactly going to look like, but if Tennessee opens it up a little bit, they rely on Marcus Mariota more than they have in the past. Corey Davis certainly seems, athletically at least, and from a skills perspective, seems to be the guy that would benefit the most. Tennessee is an interesting team because no matter where you go, it's not as if Tennessee is a popular NFL franchise. And almost by default, fantasy assets there seem to go lower than they should, mostly because casual fans don't really know too much about or haven't seen too many Tennessee Titan games. Corey Davis, I think, is for sharp fantasy football minds a great value, I think, across the board. So, yeah, if I'm getting this guy, 6th, 7th round, I feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. He obviously has like the talent is obviously there. It's just a matter of usage, and since Exotic Smashmouth left Tennessee, I guess we'll see what they can do with some of the pass catchers there. Now, at this point in the draft, too, we're sort of getting to the point where some of these quarterbacks are falling. Like if you're going to go for Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have to get him earlier, obviously, than this.
Yeah.
But there again, like there's a pretty wide range. So Russell, Deshaun, Brady are going basically anywhere from 19th to 105th.
Whoa.
On draft in the last 2 weeks.
Interesting.
I think that's probably a function of like somebody starting a run on a turn and seeing a couple of quarterbacks go, and you panic and you take Watson or Brady or Wilson. But do you have a preference in that sort of as far as prices go? Rodgers is the first tier. Like he's far ahead of everybody else.
Yeah, which I find interesting. I have Watson and Rodgers basically in a tier of their own. And look, I love me some Deshaun, man, and I know that I'm going to be higher on him than most. As a matter of fact, I don't know anybody that's going to be higher on Deshaun, because I literally have Deshaun Watson as my quarterback one over Aaron Rodgers, but I have them very, very close, and I have them in their own tier. The reason for it is, look, have we seen Deshaun Watson be stopped at any level yet? Tell me if I'm wrong. We go back to college. He was balling at Clemson.
Yeah.
He comes into the NFL just balling in the NFL. And I get it. The efficiency measures are just through the roof. And, there's going to be some offensive line questions. What they do with their offensive line, I don't know. But, yeah, so there's going to be some question marks there. But so long as this dude has Nuke Hopkins and Will Fuller on the outside, he's going to be slinging it. And if there's one problem area that he has, it's that he turns the ball over because he's too aggressive. Well, as we've seen in fantasy football, being aggressive and turnovers don't hurt you in standard scoring leagues. I mean, poster boy for this is in the same division. Look at Blake Bortles. The guy's been a top 12 fantasy quarterback year in and year out. And why is that? It's not because he's good, because he's not. And it's not because he doesn't turn the ball over, because he does with an unbelievable rate. As a matter of fact, the turnovers feed into themselves, right? The turnovers, you turn that ball over, you get the ball right back. So it's just Blake Bortles has created an ecosystem where he turns the ball over so much, it forces the ball into his hands to now make more plays later in the ball game. And that's what we've seen. So even if Deshaun Watson turns the ball over at a high rate, it's not going to hurt him at all. So to me, he's a guy, especially with his rushing ability, is a guy that I really have projected, even if the efficiency numbers come down a bit. Just give me this guy, man, especially in best ball. Forget about it. This guy is an absolute must own. And I'm glad I spent a top 5-round pick in acquiring Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I was just trying to pull it up, but if I'm not mistaken, I don't think it's particularly interceptions aren't particularly penalized at least on draft. I think it's only -1. So really, you could care less about interceptions in that format. Obviously, I can't speak for MFL 10s because I don't think I can do them in New York, but knowing your scoring system is obviously an important part too. And if you know that you can get away with some picks from some of these guys, 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions is still going to be a pretty decent day. So, all right. So definitely some Deshaun love there. Are we, I don't know. I have a hard time trying to figure out some of these rookie running back situations. So you spoke about Geis earlier.
Right.
A guy that I feel like I need to start drafting is Kerryon Johnson for the Lions. They obviously upgraded their offensive line. They drafted the kid Ragnow. I think PFF has them at like 8th, like preseason rankings for offensive lines.
Do they?
So yeah. So obviously he produced in college. He rushed for like 1,400 yards and 24 touchdowns last year. Is he a guy that you could see that you could start targeting if you're going a little bit later with the running backs? What are your thoughts on him?
I like Kerryon Johnson as a prospect. I'm not like in love with him, if that makes any sense. So I thought he was, again, a highly productive back at Auburn, but having broke down some of his games, I didn't see somebody where I'm like, man, I got to get that guy. That's a guy that I absolutely got to get next year. A big part of why I like Kerryon Johnson in fantasy, but I don't love him, is the specter of LeGarrette Blount. LeGarrette Blount last year, I mean, look, he was phenomenal. And I think he was one of the more underappreciated running backs in all of football. If you look, again, I'll go back to yards gained after close. This measures elusiveness when a defender gets to within 1 yard, all right? LeGarrette Blount was literally one of the best running backs in all of football in regards to elusiveness. 4.51 yards gained after close. To give you an idea, that is in the same range as Kareem Hunt and Alvin Kamara. That's how elusive LeGarrette Blount was. This guy was unbelievable. And I think now, as you mentioned, Ragnow being an improvement on the offensive line. You know what I really like about LeGarrette Blount's situation there in Detroit? Matt Patricia is the new head coach there. What do defensive guys like to do? They like to run the ball. You know why? Because that helps protect their defense. You got to do a little clock control. And I know they still got Jim Bob Cooter, it's still Matt Stafford's team. Make no mistake about it. But from a philosophical standpoint, I would assume, and I think it's a pretty healthy assumption, that Detroit will have a commitment to running the ball. And if that's the case, don't be surprised if LeGarrette Blount gets a lot of high leverage carries. I really wouldn't be surprised if this is a 50-50 backfield split between Kerryon and LeGarrette Blount. And Blount right now is free. I mean, you're getting this guy after pick 150. Okay, so he's a running back that when I get into the later part of my drafts, I will absolutely target.
Yeah, I think like I said, I guess the guys going around Johnson right now, and I'm firmly in just acquiring running back mode at that point in the draft, I think are guys that I'm not completely sold on, or guys that I just have too much of in my best ball portfolio, so to speak.
Right.
And I find myself sort of picking up on him. But it's definitely a crowded backfield with Blount, like you mentioned, and Riddick obviously is still going to factor in,
right,
as well. Any other guys in those mid rounds, or you think we could hit some flyers here?
In terms of running backs or wide receivers?
Either or.
Well, I think from a wide receiver standpoint, there's a couple. You know who I'll give you a running back that I love in best ball, and that's going to be Austin Eckler. Especially in PPR formats where this guy's going to be utilized all over the field. I mean, they had this guy lining up in the backfield. They had him lining up in the slot. They had him lining up out wide in some places there for the Chargers. This guy's such a great athlete, tremendous 40 time, great vertical leap. This guy's a great athlete, and laterally too, if you saw him play last year, quick as a bug, man. So Austin Eckler is somebody where, look, is he going to get 20 touches a game? Probably not. But, what's the upside tick with Austin Eckler? Well, there's going to be some real pop games that he's going to have. There's going to be that game where he might rack up, 100 total yards and 2 touchdowns. That's definitely within the range of outcomes for Austin Eckler. And in best ball, that's all you can ask for, especially for a running back that you're going to be taking, again, ridiculously cheap. So, he's somebody that I absolutely love in the best ball format. And I think he's got a place in redraft too. If you're going to spend, a 14th, 15th round flyer, lottery ticket style pick, I think Austin Eckler fits that bill. I'll stay on that same team. I don't really understand where Mike Williams is going. I'm confused. I mean, this is a guy that to me profiles as a guy that should be going, with a top 100 pick. And he's going, pick 150 or later, which is just baffling to me. And I get that he's going to be the number 2 option behind Keenan Allen, but it's still going to be a pretty pass heavy run, or pass heavy script generally, because it's Philip Rivers' team. He's the alpha on that offense. Melvin Gordon's going to get his, of course. Keenan Allen's going to get his, yeah. But no Hunter Henry there now. When they get to within the red zone, give me Big Mike. I mean, he's perfect for what they want to get done. I mean, he's that prototypical Chargers wide receiver that we've seen year in and year out, going all the way back to Vincent Jackson all the way back in the day. So I don't understand the price, but, again, going where he's going, pick 140 or later, I want that dude all day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just assuming that every Hunter Henry target is going to Keenan Allen, and forgot there's other people in Charger uniforms every Sunday. So I guess sort of to wrap up, there's a few situations that I think have some value just because of pricing. So maybe there's not like a clear answer to this yet, but I was curious your thoughts. I guess to start with the Indy art running back situation.
Yeah.
Where are you leaning there? Are you a believer in Marlon Mack, or are you taking one of the cheaper guys?
I think Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines certainly will have value. They're both great athletes, and that's what I like about the backfield situation there for the Colts from a real life perspective is that they got some really good athletes that are going to be able to tote the rock for the Colts. But that being said, from a fantasy perspective, I don't necessarily know if I'm touching either one of those guys. I think it's just going to be too volatile. I'm not sure what we're going to get. I think the offensive line will be better than last year, maybe, but it comes with question marks regardless. But yeah, I mean, look, they tried to address it through the draft, and you would imagine that the play will be better on the offensive line than it was last year. They just got ravaged by injuries, but still have some hesitation there. So the offensive line, again, I got some hesitations. The backfield split. I've got some hesitation there as well. There's reports of Jordan Wilkins or whatever getting some mix in as well. So, yeah. And I don't know, man. It's just that's a backfield situation that I just find myself avoiding.
Okay, fair enough. What about the Dallas wide receiver core? I think Hearns has been a bit of a contentious point on Twitter lately, at least with some of the people that I follow. You have Gallup there making training camp news now. I mean, I'm not necessarily a huge Tavon guy, but obviously as like the very last pick in a best ball draft, I don't think it really matters if you want to pick him or not. And then you have Beasley there too, who could gobble up some targets. Right. Do you think any of these guys is going to emerge as particularly fantasy relevant or not?
It's interesting to me why they picked up Allen Hurns. And I think he's made some big splash plays, certainly throughout his career. But this is what I found to be interesting. His last two seasons, Allen Hurns has played just 35% of his snaps lined up out wide. Right. What does that mean? 65% of the snaps that he has played has been basically in the slot position. So they get rid of Dez and they're saying Allen Hurns is going to play up outside. Well, he hasn't played a lot outside. So I'm confused by that. And then, Michael Gallup has gotten a lot of great buzz. Out of camp thus far. A former colleague of mine, Matt Harmon, loves Michael Gallup as well. And he is the wide receiver prognosticator, man. He knows there's nobody that knows more about wide receivers than Matt Harmon. And when he gives a guy the Matt Harmon seal of approval, I tend to listen, man. So he really, really likes Michael Gallup. He might be a player that emerges, but overall, I think I'm just avoiding Cowboys wide receivers, mostly because I think it's going to be a pretty low volume passing attack. I think they're going to try to get the ball to Ezekiel Elliott as much as possible. I think they'll be very aggressive up front with that offensive line. And yeah, I think they'll just try to grind out games. I just don't know if any one of those guys is going to be fantasy relevant. Certainly not in a week-to-week situation that you can accurately predict anyways. That would be my problem is even if I draft these guys, I don't know when I'm going to play them. And so maybe in a best ball situation, I might be looking at Michael Gallup or Allen Hurns, but in a redraft, I can't deal with that headache.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not something I'm considering in redraft, but I do think, like we said, Gallup especially right now is completely free, as is Austin and Beasley, although obviously they're don't have quite the ceiling that Hurns or Gallup could have, but definitely some interesting situations. The last one would be I mean, we we got your feelings on Bortles before, but the Jacksonville wide receivers, to me it seems like a mess. But I do think that if you pick the right one, that there
Okay.
is some value to be had there. So we have Lee, we have Cole, we have Dede, and new addition Moncrief down there. Are any of these guys making you interested in them, or is this another situation you're avoiding?
I really liked Keelan Cole as a player last year. That being said, man, a lot of the players they have kind of sort of replicate what he does. Even their draft pick DJ Chark is somewhat of that guy who's like a little bit of an undersized guy with decent but not great speed. But Keelan Cole really impressed me last year. I was super impressed by what I saw on tape, and some of the numbers also bore that out. Man, I've just been an overall Dante Moncrief fan for no reason whatsoever. You know how every analyst has that guy, and every fan has that guy, has that player that you're just like, I know he can be good. I know he can be good, and he's just hasn't shown. You know what I'm saying? And Dante Moncrief, for whatever reason, is that guy for me because he's a big-bodied wide receiver, has a great athletic profile, and I just fall head over heels for those type of dudes. I don't know why, man, but he's certainly there. He is among a group-wide wide receiver core that is extremely undersized. Moncrief is that one guy who is a big-bodied wide receiver. But that being said, I think they're going to spread the ball around. Marquise Lee is going to get some looks. Dede Westbrook, who played very well last year, is going to get some look. Look, they drafted DJ Chark. He's going to get some playing time. And again, Keelan Cole was there as well. So when we go back to, unpredictability, when are you going to play these guys? Yes, it helps you a little bit more in best ball. And if there was one guy that I probably would draft, it probably would be Dede Westbrook. And I know I haven't spent enough time talking about him, but he was a very, very good player for the Jacksonville Jaguars last year. But other than that, boy, it's awfully tough to predict.
Yeah, definitely. Again, those sort of last three situations are just things that I'm sort of like monitoring, and maybe there could be some sort of value there theoretically, but again, those are free guys. It's not like you need to invest too heavily. So it's worth taking some stabs in a couple of different places, especially if you're doing multiple drafts, right? Like you don't want to be completely all in on one guy and then, they go down or don't have the role that you assumed, and then you're kind of screwed. So, all right, well, we're gonna wrap up here, man. Thanks a lot for coming on. I really appreciate it. You can follow James on Twitter at James D. Koh, and me at Matt Jones TFR. And thanks for joining us today, guys. See you.
See ya.